34 felony counts. I think if I was found guilty of 34 different counts of felony charges, the state would probably take my nursing license away. And I think beyond that, I don't think I'd be able to get another license in another state. But I guess that doesn't exempt you from running for president. Today's episode is gonna be about politics, if you can't figure that out already, but probably not what you're thinking. Hi, welcome back to the podcast. I'm your host, Naomi, and this is Mosaic in Progress. So this is not going to be an episode of, Trump bashing or trying to convince you who you should vote for or who you shouldn't vote for, or anything like that, despite what my intro may have led you to believe. What I want to talk about is my time as a right-wing evangelical conservative, and the fact that on the surface, the right-wing evangelicals' support of Trump makes no sense, but I'm going to talk about why it does make sense. And we're going to get into a little bit more of deeper politics, because I worked in politics for years. And the views that I espoused at that time are completely different from what I view now. And it's kind of a difficult time for me to look back on, because it's like, who even was I? I don't recognize that person. That's not me. And to a large degree, I wasn't me. I was who I had been brainwashed to be. I was who I had been told I was supposed to be. And it was very out of harmony with my inner compass. But I was not living by my inner compass at that time. I was living by a compass that had been handed to me, basically out of survival. And we're going to get into that a little bit as well. I could talk a lot about why Trump is a bad candidate, or the things that are wrong with his policies, or the things that are wrong with him as a person suited for public office, or rather not suited for public office. I could talk a lot about the rise of sexual abuse that happened after he was elected, and even during his campaign before he was elected. I could talk a lot about the violence that has risen and his entrenched supporters and the hate and violence and vitriol that they spew. I'm not going to talk about that today, though. What I want to talk about is being a right-wing evangelical, my time during it, and how we got here. Because to anyone outside of the right-wing evangelical movement, all of them supporting Trump makes zero sense, because I'm going to use church speak here. He's an immoral reprobate. He espouses zero of the ideologies or beliefs that the evangelical movement does, with the exception of a couple that we'll get into. But he's not pro-life. He is not honest. He is not a Christian. And on the outside, it seems absolutely just mind-blowingly crazy that the evangelical right wing is so supportive of him, because he stands against everything that they stand for. Before we get into that, I'm going to talk about my time in politics. So my foray into politics mostly started because of my dad. I was going to college for agribusiness, and I don't even remember what the catalyst was, but he sat me down and he said, "You seem to care about things that are important." And have you ever thought about majoring in political science instead? I think that it would be a good fit for you. I think that you could do some good in that arena, whatever. And it seems more in line with what you care about. So I changed my major and eventually started working on campaigns. And I worked for a candidate in the 2009-2010 mid-season elections who was a Southern nationalist and was actually quite instrumental in the 10th Amendment movement that happened around that time. He helped found an organization called 10th Amendment Solutions, and they were like writing legislation in different states and pushing forward movement to reclaim states' rights. And one of the things that they also pushed was jury nullification. One of their big things was about elections, election tampering and verifying elections and things like that. And jury nullification, which if you don't know what jury nullification is, it is basically if a jury doesn't find you guilty, then even if it's illegal, and they know that you did it and there's evidence that you did it, a jury basically nullifies the law. So like, I'm just going to use the example of murder because it's easy, but say you murdered someone and everyone knew you did it, the evidence was very clear, and the jury's like, no, we're not going to convict him for it. Basically, it nullifies the law. It's not really illegal anymore. Kind of like rape in this country, because they don't see the inside of a courtroom, and when they do, they're rarely found guilty, even if there's all the evidence to convict them. Rape is basically legal in this country because juries say, no, you didn't do it. I digress. So, my big issue at the time was abortion. I was very pro-life. And I was like really solidified in it. I saw a video, and I really have no idea where this video came from. Someone was like secretly taking a video, whatever, of this partial birth abortion. And a lot of pro-choice advocates don't like that term. Because they say it's not, it's not accurate for what happens. As someone who is pro-choice now, I think partial birth abortion is a very accurate term. And this video showed this woman, like, naked on this, like, exam table, and they had induced labor, and this baby was delivered breech. And the doctor basically just cut into this baby's neck and severed the spinal cord. It was graphic and horrific, and I couldn't eat or sleep for a week. I was traumatized by this video, and I was just very motivated to stop this violence and do everything I could to stop something like this from happening. And even as a pro-choice person now, I think that partial birth abortion is horrific and violent and really shouldn't be on the table, because it's not, partial birth abortion isn't abortion. It's a medical murder. You can disagree with me about that. We can debate about it. I don't care. It's not a medical procedure. It puts the woman's life at risk. It's not, terminating in cells that are not viable. It's a topic for another day. But I saw this video and I was like, this should not happen. I was doing all this research on abortion, like the different stages of abortion. Like at the time, I could tell you like from clinical notes, how each stage of abortion is performed, whether it was through an abortifacient medication that's given or DNC. I could tell you all the risks to a mother, which now, as someone who is pro-choice, I'm still very passionate about, because most of the abortions that are performed are not done via ultrasound, which is extremely unsafe for mothers. The reason that they're not done via ultrasound is because it costs too much. It is an extra cost to have an ultrasound, and it's an extra cost to do a procedure via ultrasound. And so to cut costs, they don't use ultrasounds in the majority of clinics. This is an extra risk to the mother. This is how you get perforated uteruses. This is how women die. And you can blame it on a lack of funding, or you can blame it on the fact that our medical industry is an industry rather than something that helps people and focuses on health. Whatever you want to blame it on, it's fucked up. And women suffer because of it. So I was very pro-life. I was very pro-gun, pro-Second Amendment. My dad bought me a lifetime membership to the NRA, which, heads up, those are lifetime memberships, and they don't care whether you still want it or not. I don't even have my login info anymore for the NRA. I have never once updated my address for them, but every time I move, they find my new address and keep sending me this Freedom First magazine or whatever the fuck it's called. I cannot get away from these people. Like, they won't leave me alone. When you're a lifetime member, it's for life. It's like a life sentence, not a membership. Anyway, my dad bought me a Beretta Tomcat, and I got pink grips to put on it because I wanted my gun to be pink. Then I bought a Taurus, and I can't remember what model it was. It was a 38 millimeter. That doesn't sound right. 38 millimeter, 38. Anyway, it's been a long time since I've been in the gun fanatic circle. Is millimeter right? Anyway, it wasn't a 38. It was a 380. Whatever. Anyway, it was pink. I was very proud of it. And I would carry 2 handguns with me at all times. I had my concealed carry permit. That was what I did for my 21st birthday. I went and got my concealed carry permit, and then I went to the college that I was going to and erected a memorial for the unborn, which was a whole bunch of crosses representing, there was, I think, 50 or 51 at that time, representing the millions of babies that had been aborted since Roe v. Wade was passed. And as I'm putting this memorial for the unborn out, all of the goth kids at the college came out en masse to where I was. And everyone that was in my conservative club at the college had left me at this point. They had all gone to get stuff or whatever. They were going to be back. But it was just me out there with the crosses by myself. And like 15 or so goth kids came out towards me. And I was like, shit, I'm about to be dead. Turns out that was not what happened, and I learned a very big lesson on judging people by their appearance. They were like, what is this? And I explained to them what it was, and they were like, oh, that's so cool. That's so nice. The poor babies. Can we write on them? And I was like, what? They're like, can we write our names on them or stuff? And I was like, okay. Because I had no idea how to react to this. So they all pull out their Sharpies, because of course they all had Sharpies. And they were writing their names on it, giving their names to the babies, or rest in peace and stuff. And it was just the most odd sense of community and mutual understanding that I have ever had in my entire life. And I still think about those goth kids a lot, and how much they taught me when I thought I was doing something to change the world. So, after this, my dad brought a candidate to my attention who was running for governor in the primaries on the Republican ticket, and he had supported him, voted for him, whatever, in the last election. Didn't win. He was running again. He was like, I think this guy's great. I think he's going to be awesome. He's looking for volunteers for his campaign. You should work for it. Whatever. So I reached out and I became a volunteer for his campaign. And by the end of the campaign, I was basically running the entire campaign for free. I would like to point out. The previous campaign manager had been paid. He kind of touted throughout his campaign that he had like an all-volunteer staff, which became like kind of a point of a problem once I found out that his campaign manager was being paid. But once she left, nobody was paid on the staff. And so I was basically working for him like full-time job hours plus overtime for no compensation, which is very easy to do to gullible, idealistic women in their early 20s because they think they're changing the world, and really you're just doing free labor for a man who can't do the work himself. So there was a lot of issues that came up during his campaign regarding his, shall we say, integrity, and things that had happened in his past. And there were some things that were basically media outlets and bloggers just looking to create a controversy and get views, get hits, whatever. And they kind of stretched the truth to a degree. Now, granted, his behavior was pretty suspect, but there were, from stretching the truth to just outright blatant lies and accusations that were printed, and he ended up winning a lawsuit after the campaign was over against some of the journalists who had accused him of things like being a pedophile. Was his behavior creepy and suspect? Yes, absolutely. Was he a pedophile? No. He was, however, a Southern nationalist, which is, just bad enough in and of itself. And he was a proud Southern nationalist. He ran his campaign on Southern nationalist principles. I can't count how many times the word Yankee was used in his campaign speeches. And as someone who was raised by Southern nationalists and was still very much in my Stockholm Syndrome era, that seemed very normal and natural to me. And I was like, yeah, you tell them, get those Yankees. And I look back on it now and I'm just, holy shit, that happened. Which is why I say that racism is still alive and well in America today. We like to pretend that it's not and that we've come so far, but as recently as 2010, a candidate ran on a Southern nationalist platform of sticking it to the Yankees and taking back our rights that those damn Yankees took away from us in the war. I heard all of the controversy that was lobbied against him, the accusations that were made, and my default reaction was to trust him. Because that's what evangelical women are conditioned to do. Your authority figure, whether it's your boss, your husband, your dad, your pastor, preacher, whatever, if someone makes an accusation against them, especially if that someone is a woman, you should doubt that person, and especially if it's a woman. She's probably jealous or just wants to sleep with him and is angry that he didn't do it. That's how we're conditioned. The whole Clarence Thomas trial, the things that came out of my mother's mouth is just internalized misogyny, just laid out. If a woman accuses a man of sexual misconduct and this man has previously been thought to be a good man, she's probably just angry that he rejected her advances. The other thing is that if it's not a woman, or even if it is, but if it's not, then you should question their motives, because they're probably just trying to tear this person down because they're a good person and they're following God, and that's how the devil works. That's the other default excuse that we make in our head, because that's what we're conditioned to do. And when you keep that in mind, seeing how the evangelicals reacted to Trump's conviction makes complete sense, because that's what we're conditioned to do. Now, how they got behind supporting him is a much more winding road. So let's take a dive into that. Just to set the stage, let's go into why I left politics. So I was deep in the pro-life movement. I had started my own nonprofit called Georgia Life Solutions. I had hosted a conference. I was working with State Representative Bobby Franklin to write and research legislation that he was putting forth that was anti-abortion. And I was absolutely livid. There was a bill that was put forth in the House, and there was a House version and a Senate version that went through the Georgia legislature that year, and it was called the Fetal Pain Act, and it basically said, I believe it's 21 weeks. I may have the time incorrect, so forgive me if I'm wrong. I believe it was 21 weeks at that time. They had found evidence that a fetus can feel pain around 21 weeks. And so the bill was to make abortion illegal after that, because the fetus could feel pain, and so you were causing pain, causing harm, whatever. Bobby Franklin was extremely opposed to this bill. He was like, then you're just putting a big smiley face on any abortions that happened before that. You're saying those are fine. And I was like, he's got a point. And there was a lot of problems with the bill, just from a legislative perspective and everything. The interesting thing about this is that Bobby Franklin every year put forth a piece of legislation, and he would make sure it was the first one, so it was HB1 every year, that would make all abortion completely illegal in the state of Georgia. Now, if you're a pro-life person, and you're really, really pro-life, that sounds fantastic. That sounds perfect. The interesting thing about that is that Georgia Right to Life, which is the main pro-life organization in Georgia, the one that has all the lobbying bucks and candidate support and does all the endorsements, they oppose this bill every single year, and they would tell the legislators that they had in their back pocket not to support this bill and to block it in committee. We had evidence of them actively opposing it and preventing it from moving through the legislature. Now that sounds weird, doesn't it? Because if Georgia Right to Life wants there to not be abortion, why would they oppose a bill that makes abortion illegal? That sounds like it's on par with what they want to happen, doesn't it? It sure does to me. And I realized at this juncture that Georgia Right to Life didn't want abortion to be illegal, because if they made abortion illegal, then they lost all of their power. They lost all of their money, and they had no reason to exist anymore. Zero reason for them to be in existence, zero reason for anyone to give them money, zero reason for anyone to listen to them. Because they've accomplished what they set out to do. Time to pack it up, folks. Shut the doors, go home. We did it. And that was the beginning of the end of my stint in politics, because I started to realize it's all just a big game. I went to a senator to discuss, the senator who had signed this Fetal Pain Act bill. And I had all my talking points laid out. I came in dressed very professionally, and he gave me time to sit in his office. I sat and I laid out for him what was wrong with this bill. I laid out all of my points very articulately, well researched, and he sat kind of smiling softly at me, sort of nodding the whole time I was speaking. And I finished, and he said, "I don't disagree with anything you said." And I was like, okay. And he said, "This is what Georgia Right to Life wants us to do. So this is what we're pushing." And I said, "Okay, thank you for your time." And I walked out of there completely disenfranchised with the entire political system. And that was when I pretty much gave up working in politics. Because it's just a big rigged system. It's just a big rigged game. And the only point of the whole thing is to keep money in the pockets of the people who already have money, and to keep power in the hands of the people who already have power. And they're all jacking each other off, giving each other money and power, and making sure they all keep their money and power. And nobody else gets it, and nobody upsets the status quo. And this is where we get into, why did the evangelical right back someone who is so opposed to everything they stand for, like Trump? Well, this is how the Republican Party has always got the evangelical right to back candidates, in the same way that that bill got pushed forward and people backed it. He said, this is the next best step. This is the best option we've got. This is our best chance to win. And not just to win, because you can't just put it that. Nobody really gives a fuck about winning. You gotta make it personal. If we don't put him forward, then the left is gonna win. Those liberals are gonna put a Democrat in the office. And let's not forget who ran against him. Don't nobody hate Hillary Clinton like the right wing. Don't nobody hate her like evangelical conservatives. How could you let that woman, if you can even call her that, into office? They put this fear into them that this candidate, whoever it is the savior. They did the same thing when Barack Obama ran. We can't let him into office. We've got to vote for this other guy. I know he's got some flaws and he doesn't align with your beliefs exactly, but which would you rather have? This guy that we brought? Or that Democrat, that heathen, that godless individual? And so they put the fear into them that if you don't vote for the Republican candidate, you're not going to be able to go to church anymore. Or you may have to start taking your AR into church services with you, because they might come in and try to shoot you. They'll have the police on their side and they'll make it illegal. And then where will you be? It'll just be just like in the Bible, where they talk about how they, had to be meeting in secret and stuff like that. And you can't meet in secret. You can't let them scare you into doing that, because Jesus. This is the vitriol that they spill. It's fear-based, and people buy into it repeatedly. Every election cycle. And there are those who don't. There are those who will speak out and say, no, this is not what we stand for. This is not what our party's supposed to stand for. I'm not voting for that person. And they are cast out as outliers, as heretics, as extremists. And they'll tell them that they just want to see a Democrat in the office. You're not going to vote? Well, you might as well vote for the Democrat. You're going to vote Libertarian? Might as well vote for the Democrat. Voting for a third party is the same as voting for a Democrat. Because if you're not backing the Republican candidate, then you're backing the Democrat. This is and I've heard the same argument from the left. This is why we have a two-party system that doesn't work. Is because everyone keeps buying into this lie that not voting for the Republican or the Democrat is voting for the opposite party. So when you look at someone who is a complete immoral reprobate and obviously not anything like an evangelical Christian, like Trump, and wonder why in the world the evangelical right is supporting him, there's your answer. Because the GOP, the grand old party, the party of maintaining the status quo, because that's what conservatives are and do. Ask any political science professor. That's what conservative means. It means you maintain the status quo. It doesn't mean you make radical change towards the right wing of politics. It means you maintain the status quo. That's what the grand old party, that's what GOP stands for those of you who didn't know. That's what they do. They maintain the status quo. Which is why I think, despite Trump's entrenched supporters' belief that it was the left wing that had it out for him, I believe it was the GOP. Because he is entirely too radical and too far outside of their base to have a sustainable future for what they want to accomplish. One, he's too radical. Two, he's not that likable. And three, he makes them look bad, especially with election tampering on his record. Because whether he had been convicted or not, that's how everyone will view him. Aside from his entrenched base, in whose eyes he can do no wrong. The mental gymnastics that the evangelical right has went through to make him into a Christian man is on par with psychotic delusions. I have read articles that compared Melania Trump to a Proverbs 31 woman. Now that he has been convicted, we're seeing him compared to Jesus. Now, back in my day of being in the right wing, we would have called that blasphemy. And yet, here we are. It's all over the internet. Everyone who supports him is saying it. He's being crucified. It's a witch hunt. They're just trying to silence him because he's a good man. He's not. Whether you like him or not. To have any integrity, you have to admit he is not a godly Christian man. Nothing about his life is centered around God or the Bible. In fact, it would not be far off base to say the man has a God complex. If I were still in the church, if I were still a right-winger, and I saw all of this going down, I would probably say that this is just further evidence of our descent away from God, that the world doesn't want to follow God, that even those who profess to follow Jesus don't really want to follow Jesus. And as much as I still kind of agree with that last statement based on the entirety of the church and the entity that is the Christian church as a whole, especially in the Western world, it's almost laughable to look at it from the outside, and at the same time pathetic. To see people so scared of those who think differently than them and who believe differently than them, that they are willing to believe a lie about who someone is and what they will do for them just because he's got the right label slapped on his ticket. If Donald Trump were a Democrat, they would all hate him. They would talk about how wicked Melania is, how she's a horrible example to be the First Lady. They would talk about what an immoral reprobate he is. They would talk about how he's pro-choice. They would talk about how he believes in evolution. They would talk about how he doesn't go to church. They would talk about how blasphemous it is to autograph Bibles and sell them. They would say that's the sort of thing that Jesus would turn over tables for. But because he's a Republican, he's saving us all from those evil Democrats. Because the evangelical movement in America has nothing to do with Jesus and everything to do with nationalism. They are patriotic before they are Jesus followers. And they hold on to their ideology, whichever one it may be, and believe that over love thy neighbor. They believe that over help the widows and the fatherless. They believe that over clothe the naked. They believe that over feed the hungry. Because the hungry and the fatherless are probably Democrats on welfare trying to take our money. And so we got to get the Republican in office that's going to protect us from those liberal programs. This has been a little different from my usual fare, but it's something that's been on my mind a lot as I was heavily involved in politics during the time that I was. It was basically my whole life. And seeing just the passionate support that the evangelical church has for someone who is so outside of everything that they claim to stand for has been mind-boggling to me. And I had to sit with it for a while and figure out what it was. And then I remembered how it used to be. You got to support him. Otherwise, the Democrats will get in. And that turned into, he's our savior. We have to support him. And then all of the other conditioning just easily falls into place. Whether he gets elected or not, I don't find to be a subject that is worthy of my worry. If he does, he does. If he doesn't, he doesn't. Because people are still going to be what they're going to be. And until we can have a conversation with our neighbors who disagree with us and still be civil and still respect them and still love them and be kind to them and be neighborly to them, it doesn't matter who's in office. Because if you are adamantly against Trump and you cannot talk to a Trump supporter with any kindness or understanding, but only out of a need to prove you're right, then you're part of the problem. If you're a Trump supporter and you cannot talk to someone who doesn't support him without trying to prove that they're wrong, without adamantly trying to defend him or avenge him or prove to them that they're wrong for not supporting him, and you can't love and respect the person you're having a conversation with because they don't agree with your ideology, then you're part of the problem. Because the problem isn't who's in office, because whoever is in office is a problem. Because they're part of the status quo, and the status quo sucks. The status quo is keeping people in power, and keeping people with money, and suppressing all of the little people who put them there, and who pay their way there, and keeping them without power and money. So as long as you're focused on whoever is in office, you're focused in the wrong place. Because they're always going to be the problem. Doesn't matter which side it is. Doesn't matter who it is. They're always going to be the problem. But the problem is not them. The problem is that you're worried about them instead of focusing on being a good neighbor, being a good friend, being a good person. And that's where we need to put our focus. Not on the election, not whoever's in office. Look to your left, look to your right, look in front of you, look behind you. And whoever you see there needs for you to be a good person and needs love. And if you focus your attention there, instead of on whatever manufactured crisis the media has for us today, or whatever distracting politics are happening, or whatever corrupt politician is running for office again, then we can start to make the world a little better place. Little by little, person by person, one at a time, one day at a time, one interaction at a time. Focus where it matters, not where they try to distract you to look. I hope this has been beneficial, even though it's a stray from my usual topic. If you like this, please give me a follow wherever you listen to podcasts. I'm on every platform that I know of. And we're also on social media, Facebook, Instagram. Give us a follow there. If you have a suggestion for an episode topic, you can email me at mosaicinprogress@gmail.com. And I will see you next week on the podcast as we both continue to work on our Mosaic in Progress.